Great.
Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to the Queens District Attorney Melinda Catz and Assemblywoman Stacey Pheffer-Amato's homeowners deed fraud and squatter informational webinar. And I'm going to introduce Queens District Attorney Melinda Catz to start us off.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see so many names that are on the list here for the participants this evening. This is something that the Assemblywoman was very quick to ask if we could hold, which is the squatter information webinar, but it's also about protecting your home. And the minute we realized what a huge problem this was in the borough of Queens County, Assemblywoman Pheffer-Amato got right on the phone with me and said, I need to present something to my district. I'm asked about this all the time. So can you please do a webinar and make sure that our constituents, because we share constituents out there, know exactly what squatter rights are, know what to do when someone steals their deeds, knows how to protect themselves. I think it's so important that everyone knows their rights. I'm a homeowner in Queens County. Many of you may have read the stories about homeowners getting arrested when, someone takes over their property. People show up and they don't know what the right answer is. Someone shows a deed, someone shows a lease, and the cops really can't sort it out on the spot. It is extremely difficult to do. It is not their fault. It's just what it is. My office is filled with lawyers who every single day do investigations and deal with this kind of stuff every single day. So I want to introduce Bureau Chief Bill Jorgenson, who is head of my Housing and Worker Protection Bureau. And I'm going to tell you how this all came about over the last few months. There was an issue in one of our neighborhoods where a owner of a house showed back up at the house. Someone was living there. When the police showed up, they said, hey, listen, I have receipts for the last month or so that I've been living here. And they claimed squatters' rights. Originally, the person who owned the property is arrested, but then we sorted it out and we indicted those squatters that took over her house. Then we had another case, which was an amazing case, where a broker was trying to sell a house for someone. She showed up, she showed the house, she showed up the next day, and it was a two-family home. One of the locks were changed. She showed up the next day, another lock was changed on the other apartment in the same house. We went in, the people who changed the locks claimed that they had a right to be there, showed the lease. The lease turned out to be a forgery. They showed AT&T bills, and I think it was Con Edison. Bill will correct me if I'm wrong. They ended up being false leases, forgeries. When they were evicted, they actually took the homeowner to court for illegal eviction. They showed a false lease in court. So what we did was we indicted them for all of it. We indicted them for grand larceny, for renting out the place, for the rent they collected. We indicted them for forged documents at the civil court. But the amazing, the amazing chutzpah, the amazing that you have to have in order to do that is remarkable to me. And I always say I got my dander up, my Queen's attitude came up. And I went to the office and I said, I want every law ever written on property law. This is just wrong. Just because you have a Shake Shack receipt that, you had food delivered there a month before doesn't mean that you have a right to stay. You don't get to walk into a house you don't own and say you have a right to stay. It's not happening here. It's not happening in my borough. It's not happening in Queens. So Bill and I and a bunch of the bureau chiefs and the ADAs got together and we started really investigating these types of claims. I want to be very clear, Assemblywoman, that this is not about renters who stay. This is not about someone who has a rental lease, who's up, someone who is your brother, your sister, your uncle, your aunt, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever it is that has been allowed to stay for 30 days and now you want them out. This is not what that's about. This is about someone who, from the moment they walk over your doorstep, from the moment they open the door of that house, from the moment they walk in, they're there illegally. They're trespassing. And I don't care how many receipts they have from how many fast food restaurants or how many utilities, they can't make it right. And so that is something we wanted to talk about today. We also wanted to talk about deed theft. Now, all of you, or not all of you, but many of you on this call and I have known each other a very long time. And I need you to trust me on this. One of the best things you can do for yourselves is to go on to ACRIS. It's nyc.gov, nyc.gov. You look for ACRIS on there. If you have any problems with that, Dan will help you. Dan Brown is on here. You all know him. And we will help you do it. You register your property with ACRIS. I have it registered. My employees have it registered. Once you register your property, every time someone takes a mortgage out on your property, every time someone does a title search on your property, every time someone tries to mess with anything that you own as property, you will get a notification from ACRIS. Please do that. It is the best way to protect yourself. So there are two issues we're dealing with very separately. One is squatters' rights, that person that walks in over the threshold of your house illegally and trespasses and then says they have a right to stay. The second one is deed theft. Now, deed theft is, an important topic as well. What does that mean? That means that a family member of yours passes away, or you have a property that you haven't paid attention to, you haven't been to, someone moves in and says, I own it now, or it's partly my property now. Or someone pretends to be your grandchild and goes to the bank and says, my grandfather died, here's the death certificate, and now I inherited this property. And they can steal it if they have the right documents and they're forged correctly. You can cheat and you can fool a bank sometimes. And that's why you need to be registered on ACRIS. It's happened before. We've had it. We had a place in Laurelton that someone walked in and said, I'm the grandchild of this man that died, and literally took over the house. I'll leave you with this thought. If you do have a home that you don't live in, please make sure that it's mowed. Please make sure that if you get a bill on the property that you're not living in, let's say you get a Con Edison bill. Let's say you get a cable bill. And you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I haven't turned on that electricity. I haven't turned on that gas. I haven't turned on that cable. It must be a mistake, and you toss it. It is one of the first signs that someone may be trying to take over your property. So please be diligent. Please be careful. I will tell you that one of the bills one of the laws that the Assemblywoman passed last year has been a great help. And Mr. Jorgensen is going to talk about it in more detail. It used to be that if someone does take over your deed and then sells your property, you had to go to civil court. One of the laws that passed the legislature last year was a new law that says if you sell it to a third party, the district attorney can make a motion and actually get your property back for you. And Mr. Jorgensen will talk more about that as well, but I didn't want the moment to go without thanking her for that work. We are here for you, just so you know. You can always call us if you have a problem. We'll tell you, because you guys know me mostly. We will tell you if we can't help you. We'll tell you if we can, but we will always try. And so I guess right now I'm going to turn it over. I see Dan put the ACRIS address in the chat room. Please use it. Please don't ignore any signs that someone's taken over your property. And right now I'm going to ask Assemblywoman Stacey Pheffer-Amato to say a few words. I want to thank her for hosting this. I want to thank her for inviting us and for the work that you do in the community. Thank you, Assemblywoman Pheffer-Amato. You're muted. Yep.
You're muted, Assemblywoman.
Assemblywoman, you're muted.
Man, that was my best intro ever. Well, I want to say thank you, District Attorney Katz, for the working together, both of us. When I call, you pick up, and you're an action person, and I thank you for doing that and educating me in this space where we can partner. So thank you. Good evening to everyone on the call. It's great that you're joining us. This is really important information that you're going to receive. The District Attorney stated that it's your property and you must protect it. And it seems like it's something we shouldn't. It's our house, it's our home, but it's happening. Deed theft and squatters are existing in our communities, and we need to know to protect ourselves. And as many as you know, this started with this a squatter in our community suspected that neighbors called me directly for their suspicions. So I don't think there's any nosy neighbors out there, because if it wasn't for these neighbors, they are the ones who brought it to our attention. Little investigation coordinated with the NYPD, and this person was arrested. And thanks to our DA, she's being charged because the law is clear. You don't get to break into a house and think there's no consequences. You don't get to, in this case, deliver Amazon packages to yourself, and that establishes your residency. This year, as your Assemblywoman, I did work very hard to solidify these squatters' laws that are not tenants. And thank you for clarifying that, District Attorney Katz, that this is not about renters who stay for those reasons. This is about people who are coming in and just assuming the ownership and then taking the space. And I want to make sure that we don't have any legal housing. We want to make sure that we always have legal housing protections, but to know that people have rights. So further, I just voted to confirm that deed theft, there is a crime of deed theft, and that, as you said, you're prepared to prosecute or take that house back from a third party. And we're working constantly to do everything we can to prevent you from losing your property. And that's why this webinar is so important. I'm so glad that so many people have signed on.
The end result, however, is whether they're doing it by getting you to sign something you don't understand, impersonating you, or filing false documents for the City of New York to make it look like they own the house. The end result is that now this person has claim title to it. Once they have title to a house, they are off to the races. What's a house in Queens worth?
Hey, Bill?
Yeah.
If you don't mind,
Sure.
I just want to make sure that everyone on this call is very clear. There are two separate issues we're talking about. They coincide somewhat, but just so everybody's clear, one is the squatters who come into your home and say, well, now I have a right to stay. They're not saying they own it, never, but they're saying I have a right to stay and you can't throw me out. The other is the deed issue. And both are very important. Both are very easy to forge and create. But I want everyone to realize that the deed theft issue is important because you don't actually have to see anybody on your property. So if someone can forge your deed or forge your title, they can get a mortgage out on your property, let's just say. Right? So it doesn't necessarily, you can't say, oh, I check the house every week, so therefore it's not happening to me. Right? Because that could definitely be, you could still be a victim of deed theft or someone taking a mortgage out on your property. Squatters, yes, they are there themselves, but they're saying, I don't own the house, but I have a right to stay.
That's right.
That's all.
Yep. No, thanks for clarifying that, because it really is important that we understand that homes are sort of taken over in two separate ways. One through deed theft, which I was just talking about, and one through squatting. Right? And the squatting is literally entering and remaining in a premises, which is a dwelling, a house, a home, without the permission and authority of the owner or the lawful custodian, right? The executor of the estate or whatever. And with the squatting, you've actually got the person in the house. In some ways, that makes it a little clearer because now we know who's in the house and we can go after that person, as opposed to the deed fraud where that could be somebody we have no idea who that person is, and we got to do a lot of digging to find them. But the ultimate result is that you lose the use of your house, right? You either lose the title to your house or you lose the use of your house. You can't get in your house. And in the case that the district attorney was talking about previously, this woman tried to get into her house and she tried to throw these squatters out and she got into trouble as a result. And thankfully, we all cleared all this mess up. I don't know who the bad guys were, but she went through a nightmare I wouldn't wish on anybody. So how can you protect yourself? How can you avoid becoming a victim? Well, the first thing is, easy enough, mow the lawn, right? Mow the lawn, make sure that the house is maintained. With my mom's house in Staten Island, I got Mr. Sanchez, he's mowing the lawn for my parents for 20 years. He's still mowing that lawn, still trimming the bushes, okay? Look at the bills, right? I always talk when I do these live presentations, I ask everybody to raise their hand. How many people here like to get their tax bill in the mail, their property tax bill in the mail? And nobody raises their hand except me, because I know that if I get my property tax bill on my mom's house in Staten Island, that house is still in my name and nobody's stolen the deed. Another thing that you want to do is, if you're not living in the house, you want to be going there and visiting on a regular basis. You want to make sure that everything is maintained. You want to make sure that the lights are on, that the house is in good condition, that people see that someone's keeping an eye on the house. It's just the very act of going in and out of the house, turning the lights on and off, showing the neighbors that there's somebody there, can help deter the squatters. The other thing that's really important, and this gets back to the Assemblywoman's point about the nosy neighbor, or I like to think of it as the good neighbor, right, is tell the neighbors what's going on with the house. When I put my mom's house up for sale, I walked around the neighborhood and I told everybody exactly what was going on. I even gave a couple of them accommodation to the house so they could get in just in case there was a real problem. I gave them all my numbers and said, call me if there's any problems. And I've had a few calls, mostly to say everything's okay, but they know to contact me. If your house is Wi-Fi enabled, you might want to think about getting a Ring camera. You don't have that, but that's always an option. Make sure that those bills are all paid. And the other thing that we've seen people do, one of the other cases is, remember, the police can't be housing court judges, but they are willing to make arrests where they have evidence. And so one of the things that we've seen people do is go into the house on a regular basis to take telephone video, timestamp video of the inside of the house showing that nobody's living here. There's no furniture, there's no personal items, there's nothing. And we've seen in cases where there have been squatters that the police are called, they come to the house, squatters know how everybody thinks that after 30 days they have rights. And so they say, I've been here more than 30 days. Well, in one case where the landlord said, the owner said, no, they haven't, because here's this timestamp video from last week showing that there's nobody in the house. Police felt a lot more comfortable to evict, remove trespassers. That's something to do. They also want to think about filing a letter with your local police precinct or your local neighborhood association saying that, nobody has, this is not a rental property. Anybody in this house not here with my permission. I don't know how well that's working. This is sort of like new ideas that we're hoping will work out. It's worth considering. The other thing is that you want to get on ACRIS, right? Especially to prevent deed fraud, you want to secure the title to your home. So, and I know that Dan has put out that information. We also have material that we can make available that walks you through the process of filing the title to your property with the city so that you can, establish your record, plant your flag, and establish your ownership over the home. And then, of course, with ACRIS, if anything happens, if anybody tries to, steal the title to your home, you'll get a notification. Now, what to do if, God forbid, you're actually a victim of squatters? Let's start with squatters. What do you do if you're a victim of squatters? Well, look, in theory, they say you can engage in self-help. I strongly recommend against that. That sounds like a great way to get shot. What I would say is call 3 people. Call the police, call our office, call an attorney, because we can all help you in different ways depending on what's going on. If they're there only for a few days and the police have evidence and feel that they can make an arrest or at least remove them, they will do that. If we can prove that these people are actually squatters, we can open up an investigation. I mean, we're always going to open up an investigation. We can maybe engage in actual prosecution. We can do something. Alternatively, thanks to some of the new laws that the state assembly and the state legislature have put together, there are new tools in the civil field that will allow landlords a greater ability to evict squatters, because the legislature has now made it clear that squatters are not tenants and they don't have the same rights. We've yet to see how that's going to work out, because this is all uncharted legal territory. In fact, a lot of what we're doing right now is pretty cutting edge. That's why it's exciting. So we're going to work and see what works best. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, because not only are we getting the word out to everyone here, but I also want to hear back from the community to find out what does. The bottom line is this, is that we are here for you. We will help you in any way we can. And if we can't help you, we will help you find help. Okay. And where we can prosecute people for being squatters, we will. You can't walk into somebody's house that you don't know and set up housekeeping and claim it's your house. You can't file false documents or con someone out of their home and steal their life savings. We're not going to let that happen. And I'll tell you something, we've been very successful. We have actually to date returned over, let me get my figures here, 14 homes in the Queens County have been returned to their owners by my bureau because of the ability, because of the resources that the district attorney has devoted to this, because of the laws that have been passed. 14 homes. That's 19 bogus deeds have been validated. And we have more on the way. This is really exciting stuff. But, you know, we're going to go after these people. We're going to go after them with both barrels. Dan, are there any questions? Does anybody have any thoughts or concerns?
Thank you, Bill. Bill, what is if you tell people to call our office, they can certainly call me. I'll put my contact info in, but what is the best way for them for somebody who has an issue with this to reach us? I'm happy they can call me, but if you have a better, more direct.
Thanks for bringing that up. We have our helpline. Our district attorney's helpline is 718-286-6673. And staff man this line. They don't man it 24 hours, but they get back to you very quickly, and you will talk to a human being, and ultimately you'll talk to either myself or one of my staff members about your problem. And we can get the ball rolling on helping you solve your situation. So again, that number is 718-286-6673. That's 718-286-6673. And you know, if you have questions, and sometimes we just get questions. And
all right. So I know there was some confusion before about people using the chat. The chat is disabled because we're just not using that. But I think Anna put the Acris link on through the chat for everybody to see. We're using the Q&A button. It's next to the chat. If you have a question, you can just go there. One question we have, Bill, a person writes, I hold title insurance. Does this protect me against title theft? Secondly, can I hold legally responsible the lender who made a mortgage to a third party?
Okay, so we're going to start getting into civil law, and asking me about civil law is kind of like asking your heart specialist what to do about your brain tumor. But to a certain extent, look, that's what title insurance is for, right? It's to protect your title to the house. If you buy a property, the title insurer is supposed to make sure that the title is clear and legitimate. And if it turns out that the house was stolen and sold to, you because you had no idea you were buying a stolen title, well, yeah, absolutely. Put that claim in with the title insurance company, and they should be held accountable. In terms of, if you could just refresh my recollection on the second part of the question, Dan.
Can I hold legally responsible the lender who made a mortgage to a third party?
The lender who made the mortgage to a third party, that's a really good question, and I'm not really sure I could answer that. That would be something I would talk to my civil attorney about. That's one of the reasons why it's so important that you call three people if you're the potential victim of deed fraud. You call the police, you call our office, and you call the civil attorney. Because there are civil remedies that are available to you that we just don't have the ability to do. So I would talk to a civil attorney about
Okay. Somebody's asking, will all of this be emailed post discussion tonight? I'll talk to Anna. If we have everybody's email, I could certainly send an email out with the actress information as well as our contact information. If that helps everybody, I'll certainly send that out. Bill?
that. Yep. And Dan,
Yes,
just
sir.
one other thing. I don't mean to cut you off, Dan, but I know that we also have some flyers and some information that we've handed out at live events. Would
Yes.
it be possible for us to make that available to the viewers here?
Yes, we certainly have e-copies of all of that stuff.
That's great. Yeah, because that can tell you a lot of what we've been discussing and some other things that maybe we might have missed.
A question. My mother has a tenant, quotation marks, who has not paid rent since December, signed a lease with my mother, but it turns out since the house is in trust, she is not the landlord. I am. What is the status of this tenant?
Well, the fact is that the tenant has rights because you're talking about a voluntary association. This is not a stranger broke into your mother's house, that your mother didn't know. This isn't like a burglar or a trespasser. This is actually a tenant. And the most important thing that you can do is to speak to a civil attorney who has expertise in landlord-tenant matters if you're looking to evict a person or come to a settlement, come to an arrangement to get them to leave and pay what they owe you.
Okay. Somebody asked, and I don't want to get down a rabbit hole.
No, I'm sorry, just to clarify, they are not a squatter. Let's be very clear about that. This person had a lease and they stopped paying rent. They are not a squatter. Sorry.
Someone just wrote, thank you for this. Will you have a webinar like this for co-op apartment issues? My question is, I don't know if we will, but how is this different? Is there anything you could say about that or any, resource or something you can, point, in briefly to somebody who's dealing with this?
Well, so here's the thing. Co-op issues, things like mismanagement by the co-op board, nepotism, that sort of stuff. These are all civil issues, conflicts of interest, that sort of thing. We get a lot of complaints about, co-op boards behaving badly because, they got their cousin the contract and the guy didn't do the job right. And now the floor leaks, right? Or they're wasting money on stuff that people don't like, or they're not holding meetings like they're supposed to, or they're not enforcing the co-op bylaws, all of which is bad behavior. Problem is that that's civil. We can't really get involved in that. It's not appropriate for a district to take sides in a civil dispute between co-op members and their board. That's really something you need to talk to a civil attorney about.
Okay. And, this is a question that a lot of people ask. I know it's not on mark with what we're talking about, but I think you answered this already. But just the simple question of what do we do? What does somebody do in a situation where a tenant just stops paying rent and refuses to move out?
Get a lawyer, go to
Yeah.
civil court, go to landlord-tenant court, right? And that's the best thing you can do. And do it sooner than later because the courts are, notoriously backed up and they don't move as fast as they'd like to. So you don't want to wait around. You want to jump on that right away.
If a tenant has someone living in the property without us knowing, and that tenant is kicked out, would that person be considered a squatter, or would they have the right to be there?
So if your tenant rents out your house to another tenant, that second tenant has rights. That's not a squatter. And I know because it happened to me. So no, that's not a squatter. That's a subtenant, a sublessor. It's basically the tenant of the tenant, and it's your tenant's responsibility to get them out. But obviously, they may just walk away and leave you with their former tenant may walk away and then leave you to solve the problem. So again, the solution is to get an attorney and go to housing court.
Okay, I'm sending out a message. Can someone steal your deed if your property is in a trust?
Yes, they can, because they can they can falsify, the records that would show that the properties, to make it look like the property's in their name. Uh, with what happens is with deed theft, somebody comes in and they file a deed with the city, right? The city register, which keeps track of all the property in the city. And if they make it look like the trust sold the property, and Joe Jones, our fraudster, right, files documents with the city that says the trust sold 123 Main Street to me, and now I'm the legal owner of the property. Guess what? He just stole the deed to the house, whether it's in trust or held by somebody in some other form. So yes, they can.
Okay, very good. This one asked a couple of times. Just someone, how does a civil attorney help versus a tenant landlord attorney?
Well, landlord tenant attorneys are civil attorneys. So it's just that somebody who does a lot of landlord tenant law is going to be, it's like anything else. You want a specialist, right? I go to Dr. Andrew for my biannual checkup, but if I've got a problem, with my thyroid, I'm going to go to an endocrinologist. It's the same with that, right? You have your civil attorneys who maybe do a little of everything, but you want a specialist with this sort of stuff because they're going to be familiar with the courts. They're going to know how to file things more effectively. They're going to know the issues that come up. So you always want to, if you have a housing issue, want to get an attorney who specializes in housing related.
Somebody's asking, please indicate what title insurance protects. If you know, if not, is there a place where they could get this information?
Yeah. Insurance protects the title to your house. It basically shows that nobody else has a claim on the house. But I think for further, information, you might want to, I can't really talk too much more than that. It's just one of these things where they're saying that the title is good, and if it's not, then you're going to have a problem. I wouldn't want to comment any further than that. It's not really my specialty.
Okay. If the homeowner holds a deed and the thief has a bogus deed, how will the courts handle the case to prove who is the real owner?
That's a really good question.
I was saying
it's going to get litigated, right? It's going to go into court, and we're going to, if it's a civil matter, the attorneys are going to fight it in civil court. If it's a criminal matter, we can prove that this person falsified the deed, then we're going to charge him with a number of different crimes, including which could include falsifying business records, false filings, two separate things, right? We could charge them with grand larceny. We could charge them with possession of stolen property. So we can prove that someone filed a bogus deed with the city of New York to steal a home. Well, then we're going to charge them with a number of different crimes. That's why we're going to handle it.
It's two questions that I don't know if there's an actual answer for it, but why is it so easy to forge a deed? The process of somebody just creating a fake deed, like are these like, with other scams that, people have, these are very intricate process that people are gathering this information, or is it just too easy to forge a deed?
Well, the actual forging of the document is basically, you print up a document and, on your computer, right? I mean, it's not like when I was a kid where this was not an easy thing to do because we used typewriters. Remember typewriters, right? So nowadays, people have these amazing printers that can print really, really good looking documents. Actually creating the bogus document, the physical paper, that's the easy part, right? You just go online, you look at a sample deed, and then you plug in your name and all the information that you need to, and then you get down to the city register and you file it with the clerk, with the county, right? The hard part is identifying the property and learning which documents need to be filled out and how to fill them out. And that's why what we found is that there are people who almost specialize in this type of crime, because it's not an easy thing to learn. I mean, like I would not know how to do this if I hadn't been doing these cases for years. So it's sort of a steep learning curve, but once you actually know how to do it, then creating the document is as easy as creating any document.
So we've had a couple of questions on trusts. Is a house in your name more protected than a house in a trust, or are they equally safe or unsafe?
Now we're starting again. I'm getting back into the civil area here. I think the
Right.
most important thing is that that house be registered with Congress so that it is clear who has the lawful custodian of the house. Wouldn't want to go any further than that.
Okay,
The other thing is just to go back to that previous question. One of the other reasons why it appears easy to steal a house is because the city register, which collects all the documents pertaining to property throughout the city of New York, is basically obligated to take any properly filled out paperwork, right? And make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and everything's filled out. And there's a reason for that, because people file thousands of documents every day with the city register. And, if they had to sit there and do a forensic analysis of each and every one of these documents that came in, the whole thing had come to a crashing halt. So what they do is they try to sort of build in flags within the system to identify, suspect documents. But unfortunately, nothing is perfect, and sometimes these things get through. That question?
okay, we're winding down, but hold on. No, we've had this question before. Oh, somebody just asking, and I don't know if you noticed, but someone's asking about where somebody could get a service or a resource like Acris for something, a property in the state, but not in the city of New York.
Most of this stuff I think is maintained at the county level. So for example, if you live in Nassau County, you go to the Nassau County Clerk's office. And interesting enough, Staten Island, and I can say this because I grew up in Staten Island. Staten Islanders, they're separate and apart, or at least they want to be. Staten Island maintains its own separate database through the clerk's office. So you generally deal with this at the county level.
Okay, and we'll wrap with this. You covered it a bit, but a couple of people are just asking, for tips on just how to prevent deed fraud. You probably covered it already, but just for people who don't get, and also, and I don't want to forget to do this, but I want to just give my contact information. A lot of times people reach out to me and then I filter the cases to Bill. My phone number, I'm Dan Brown. My phone number is 718-286-6593. 718-286-6593. My email address is dtbrown, BROWN, @queensda.org.
So to answer that question about how to protect yourself from deed fraud, that's a good question. All right. And the reason why it's a good question is because a lot of the tactics that you're going to use to protect yourself from fraudsters are also the same things that you use to protect yourself from deed fraud. Because at the end of the day, it's about somebody stealing your home, right? Whether they're stealing it to use it or they're stealing it to steal the title, they're still trying to steal your home. So the same things that you're going to do to protect yourself from a squatter, who is that trespasser, that burglar that you don't know that invaded your home and set up housekeeping and lives there, you're going to do to protect yourself against the fraudster who filed the bogus paperwork to make it look like she owns your home, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to maintain the outside of your home. You're going to visit your home on a regular basis. You're going to make sure that your title, this is particular to deed fraud, you're going to make sure that your title is registered with the city. You're going to check that title with the city on a regular basis by going to Acris. You're going to watch out for your bills to make sure that the bills are coming to your house, okay? Because if they're not, that's a sure sign that maybe somebody else bought the house. You're going to talk to your neighbors. You're going to tell them, hey, feel free to call me if you have any questions, okay? The big thing is you protect your home by making sure people know that you're watching your home. That's the most important thing. Make it clear to anybody that's looking at this house that there's somebody got their eyes on it. All right? Whether they're a fraudster who's trying to steal the deed or a squatter who's trying to move in, if you make it clear to somebody that somebody's watching that house, they're less likely to go after your house and go on to the house around the corner that nobody's paid attention to for 4 years. Okay? So that's the most important thing. If there's one thing that anybody takes away from this seminar, it's make sure that everybody knows you're paying attention to that house. That's critical. Any other questions?
I do have one. I'm just answering an email. Okay. I don't know if you have an answer to this, but someone's just asking approximately how much time and money have to be spent to evict a squatter. But they also ask, will the homeowner have use of the house while the proceedings go forth?
Well, that depends. Okay. That depends on a lot of things. So, for example, with my tenant, I actually gave up a month's rent. All right. So that she would have the money she needed to move out. Right? And believe me, that was a bargain. I hear horror stories. It can, people have often been told, hey, the guy who hasn't paid rent in a year will move out if you pay him $10,000 in moving expenses. Um, that can be money well spent. How much does it cost to clean up the mess after they left the house? Well, Servpro charged me $14,000 to clean out my mom's house. So there's that, right? And she was a tenant. She was legit, but she was a slob and a hoarder. So, it's the costs can vary greatly. And that's why how much does it cost to get somebody else? It depends.
Yeah.
How long does it take him to get out? It depends. Can you go into the house while it's in litigation? Probably not, because the person's still there.
Wow.
That's why I always tell people, theoretically, they say in theory you can use self-help. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's a good way to get shot. All right. Call the cops, call a lawyer, call our office.
And we'll make this the last one. But someone's asking about Acris. Will they send a registered, and I think it covers this, but will they send a registered owner a warning of a change in ownership? That should be a part of it, right?
Yes, that's right. So what happens is anybody who owns a separate home, as opposed to an apartment, a person who owns a separate house, a detached house, an unattached house, is automatically enrolled in the recorded documents notification. What is that program? That's a program that's going to send you a letter. I actually have a copy of a letter here. That's going to give you the heads up. Here we go. They're going to send you a letter that looks like this. It's going to be on New York City letterhead, and it's going to say somebody filed a document regarding your home. Now, in this particular case, and I'm not going to show you any more details because this is a complainant that we want to protect their privacy, but you're going to get a notice from the city register saying someone filed a document pertaining to your home. Most of the time, it's innocuous. Most of the time, it's like one mortgage company assigns the mortgage to another company, or in this particular case, the mortgage company brought in a different attorney for power of attorney. But it might be that somebody filed the deed to your house without you knowing. So yes, you will get notified. Now, if you live in a condominium and you own your apartment, you can also sign up to get notifications. But I've been told by the Department of Finance that's not necessarily a good thing, because they send out notifications for the entire property. So that means that anytime a document is filed in that 65 unit condominium, you could get a notification. So you could be getting 2 or 3 notifications a day every time somebody files something. So I don't know if they're working to fix that. I don't want to speak for them.
And this is the third time I said last question, but I promise this time. Just somebody's just trying to get an idea of what is like we talked about the work you've done and the DA's office has done about people who have squatted and the cases we've worked on. What is the general idea? Like, what is this punishable by? Like, what kind of jail time or punitive damage? What is the risk of someone who's squatting and what's the punishment for doing this?
Another excellent question, and I'm going to give you a nice lawyerly answer. Depends. It depends on the nature of the squatting. It depends on the nature of the defendant. If let's just say for the sake of argument, somebody is renting a house from a person they believe is a legitimate landlord, but that person who holds himself out as a landlord is actually a squatter, I'm not going to hold them as accountable as I would the person who's claiming to be the landlord, right? Because that tenant, they're just looking for a good deal. It really depends on what we can prove. If it turns out that somebody just misunderstood the law and thought that, hey, I should be able to get this through adverse possession because the house has been abandoned since Sandy, I'm not going to hold that person as accountable as I am the person who just breaks into a house that they know is, hasn't been, inhabited in a year and a half, and then they decide to take over. So the sanctions range the gamut, right? They can go from simple trespass, which is a misdemeanor, punishable, by conditional discharge, probation, fine, jail, whatever, all the way up to burglary. And burglary can carry a jail time, a sentence of jail that can be quite serious, especially, if that person, if that squatter or that deed thief has a prior conviction. If you got a prior conviction, state of New York will land on you with both feet. Now you're looking at substantial state prison. I believe a person who has a prior felony conviction who is convicted of burglary too, which is breaking into a home, could face up to 15 years in prison. I mean, listen, that's pretty unusual. It doesn't happen in most cases, but it's out there. And where we get those defendants, and we have them, we will go after them. And that bad guy, I'm going to do everything I can to put him in jail for a long time. Let me be very clear about it.
Very good. I'm asking Anna if she's able to put my contact in the chat. And we're going to
I
wrap
did.
it.
It's in the chat, and then
Oh.
I answered one of the questions.
Okay, very good. And thank you to the people on here who said so many nice things about what we did tonight. I hope that everybody found it informative and enlightening and helpful. Please use my contact if you're having these issues, or contact Bill through his contact, but I'll filter the cases to him if you want to contact me. I'm sorry if there's anything that got by that we didn't answer or didn't, if you need more clarity, you can reach out and we'll do the best we can for you or point you towards a resource that will get you the answer you're looking for. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Assemblywoman Stacey Pheffer-Amato. Thank you to the DA. Bill, you're wonderful as always.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to end at this time. And like I said, feel free to use our contacts to continue the discussion. Thank you.
And have a great night, everybody.